Good evening, bosses. Welcome back to Boss Economic World, where we strip the varnish off the mahogany table of global finance to see the termites eating away underneath. I'm your host, and today is November 21st, 2025. If you've been following the ticker tape this morning, you might think the world is just stumbling through another Friday. But if you look at the Balkans, that beautiful, volatile geopolitical Jenga tower, you'll see that a massive piece just got pulled out. And the tower? Well, it's wobbling. For decades, we've been told that Russian energy dominance in Eastern Europe was as inevitable as death, taxes, and inflation. But last month's US sanctions on Russia's oil industry didn't just pinch the Kremlin, they effectively amputated its economic arm in the Balkans. Today, we are going to analyze the truth behind the seizure of assets in Bulgaria, the panic in Serbia, and why a region that has been balancing between East and West for centuries just fell off the tightrope. We're also going to look at the $1 trillion miracle in Poland, the paranoia in Hungary, and why your next car charge might come from a company that used to sell you petrol and hot dogs. Grab your coffee or your rakia. Let's restore the full picture. Let's start with the headline event. The US sanctions imposed in October 2025 were designed to be the nail in the coffin for Vladimir Putin's war machine. But unlike previous rounds, which were more like sternly worded letters, these sanctions hit the infrastructure. For the uninitiated, let's rewind the clock. The year is 1999. The Backstreet Boys are on the radio, and Lukoil, the Russian energy giant, buys neft to him. This isn't just a refinery, it's the industrial heart of Bulgaria. Fast forward to 2024, and it's Bulgaria's largest company. It's the economic equivalent of having a bear living in your guest room. It keeps the house warm, but you're always terrified it's going to eat you. Across the border in Serbia, 1999 was the year NATO intervened in Kosovo. Isolated and angry, Belgrade fell into Moscow's embrace. Within a decade, Gazprom owned the majority of NIS, Serbia's oil and gas monopoly. Russia wasn't just a supplier, it was a big brother in the literal and Orwellian sense. But here we are in late 2025. The US dropped the hammer. The sanctions made it radioactive for anyone to touch Russian crude processing without facing secondary measures. In Bulgaria, the government didn't just wring its hands this time. They seized Lukoil's assets. This is a country that, historically, had ties to Moscow so cozy they were practically sharing a toothbrush. My colleagues Slav Okov and Sofia and Misha Sabic in Belgrade reported this week that the seizure allows Neftekhim to win a reprieve to continue operations until April 2026 while a buyer is sought. Think about the economics here. Bulgaria just nationalized the primary lever of Russian influence in their territory. Why? Because the cost of compliance with the West became cheaper than the cost of loyalty to the East. It's a cold, hard calculation. Now, look at Serbia. President Aleksandar Vučić is currently sweating through his bespoke suit. He wants to avoid nationalizing NIS because that screams betrayal to his voters who still harbor pro-Russian sentiments. But economics doesn't care about sentiment. We have data showing Serbia has oil availability for exactly 1 week as of today. 1 week. After that, Vučić has to tap state reserves or buy on the spot market, where premiums are currently running 15 to 20% higher due to winter speculation. He is stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he nationalizes NIS, he severs the historic link with Russia. If he doesn't, the lights go out and the cars stop running. A solution is expected as early as this weekend, and folks, my money is on survival. The reduction of Russian economic might here is irreversible. Even if the war in Ukraine ended tomorrow and sanctions were lifted, the trust is gone. The infrastructure has changed hands. Moscow's soft power pipeline has run dry. While the Balkans are rewriting history, the rest of the region is proving that economics is never boring. Let's look at Prime Minister Viktor Orban. He's currently preparing for a financial market meltdown. He's moving assets, tightening controls, and preaching doom. Here's the funny part, investors are baffled. Hungary is currently one of the world's best performing emerging markets. The forint has gained significant ground this year. Real estate prices in Budapest are soaring up another 8% this quarter alone, and the central bank is actually warning of overheating, not collapsing. So, why the doom and gloom from Orban? As an economist, I look at incentives. Is he seeing a black swan we aren't? Or is this political theater to justify tighter control over the central bank? When a politician tells you the sky is falling while the stock market is hitting highs, check if he's selling umbrellas. By the way, Hungary kept the EU's highest key interest rate unchanged for a 14th month. They are keeping the brakes on, even as the engine revs. Let's talk about Daniel Kretinsky. If you don't know him, you should. He's the Czech billionaire who buys power plants like most people buy groceries. He just moved to dilute his exposure to the UK and EU by acquiring a stake in the French oil major Total Energies. Why does this matter? Kretinsky is a bellwether. When the smartest guy in the room starts diversifying away from purely European assets into a global giant with assets in Africa, the Middle East, and the Americas, he's hedging against European regulatory risk and energy volatility. Meanwhile, in Slovakia, his utility company, Slovensk Elektrarne, is issuing bonds for the first time in 14 years. They are locking in capital now. Why? Because they know the energy transition is going to be expensive, and capital might not be this cheap in 2026. Now, let's move to the heavyweight champion of the region, Poland. Folks, Poland is officially a $1 trillion economy. That is a massive milestone. It puts them in the big leagues. But as we know in economics, there is no such thing as a free lunch. That growth brought a massive jump in salaries. Great for workers, right? Sure, until you look at Krakow. For 20 years, Krakow was the darling of the BPO world. International firms flocked there because smart, English-speaking graduates were affordable. Well, they aren't affordable anymore. They are expensive. And now, AI is entering the chat. We are seeing a trend where international firms are retrenching, cutting jobs in Krakow and replacing them with automated AI systems or moving them to cheaper jurisdictions like India or the Philippines. The middle-income trap is snapping at Poland's heels. And it's not just economic threats. Prime Minister Donald Tusk confirmed this week that 2 operatives working for Russian intelligence were responsible for an explosion that damaged a key rail link to Kiev. Kaja Kallas, the EU's top diplomat, called it terrorism at a Bloomberg event yesterday. This is critical. This isn't just spying. This is kinetic sabotage of economic infrastructure. It raises the risk premium for doing business in the region. Insurance rates for logistics in eastern Poland are already climbing. Speaking of Ukraine, the financial lifeline is getting complicated. The EU has proposed a new funding mechanism, a €90 billion grant or an EU debt-backed loan. Here is the kicker, they are proposing this because they still can't agree on how to use the frozen Russian assets. The bureaucratic hesitation is staggering. They are worried about the legal precedent of seizing sovereign assets, fearing it might destabilize the euro. Meanwhile, Russia isn't hesitating. They launched a massive missile and drone strike yesterday, killing at least 20 people. This happened while Washington and Moscow were supposedly back-channeling a peace plan. It's a classic negotiation tactic, bomb the table before you sit at it. But Ukraine is making moves too. President Zelensky just secured a preliminary deal with France for up to 100 Rafale fighter jets. That is a multi-billion euro contract that signals Ukraine is transitioning its air force to NATO standards for the long haul, regardless of how the current peace talks go. Let's take a quick look at the dashboard, because numbers don't lie, only the people interpreting them do. 1.allegro.eu, Poland's e-commerce giant saw shares drop the most in 7 months. Why? Slowing sales in November. This is the canary in the coal mine. If the Polish consumer, flush with those new high salaries we talked about, is stopping their spending, we might be looking at a broader demand slowdown or an oversaturation of the market. 2. Czechoslovak Group, on the flip side, defense is booming. This defense contractor reported an 82% jump in revenue to €4.5 billion in Q3. War is terrible for humanity, but it is incredibly profitable for shareholders of ammunition factories. 3. Lithuania and Belarus, Lithuania reopened its border. Why? Because the Belarusian regime finally cracked down on irregular migrants. This signals that sanctions are biting Minsk enough that they are trying to play nice to keep trade routes open. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought on evolution. We started this show talking about Lukoil and oil refineries, the dinosaurs of the 20th century. But let's look at Orlen, Poland's state oil giant and the largest company in the region. While Bulgaria figures out what to do with an old Russian refinery, Orlen is pivoting. They are accelerating the rollout of charging points for electric vehicles. Here is the data point that matters: sales of EVs in Poland are growing more quickly than anywhere else in the EU. Think about the psychology of the gas station. For years, they made more money selling you coffee, hot dogs, and newspapers than they did on the low-margin petrol at the pump. Now, with charging taking 20 minutes instead of 2 minutes for pumping gas, you are a captive audience. You are going to buy more coffee. You are going to buy lunch. Orlen isn't just an oil company anymore, they are becoming an energy and retail utility. They plan to lead the way in selling electricity. So, what is the full picture today, on November 21, 2025? The map is being redrawn. The Russian energy empire that held the Balkans hostage for 30 years has been dismantled in less than 30 days. The vacuum is being filled by Western capital, local nationalization, and a pivot toward green energy. Poland is rich but facing the AI crunch. Hungary is rich but pretending to be poor. And defense contractors are the only ones not worried about a recession. The tectonic plates have shifted. If you are an investor, look at who owns the infrastructure, not who makes the speeches. If you are a citizen, watch the gas prices, but watch your government's debt levels closer. I'm the boss, and that's the economic reality. See you next time.